I began to lose hope. I began to distance myself from community, and I started to justify the things that I wanted because I felt like I was a good person. And those things compel in comparison to when you actually look at the magnificent stature of who Jesus is, and you realize, oh, I don't deserve any of that. Like, so it helped reset me. And the best thing I did was, even in my wilding out, if you will, I returned back to church.
What is up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Shaping the Culture. Now, let's just get to it. The whole secular sacred divide. There is no distinction in the scriptures. Some of us have trust issues with God, and some of us, it's like, does God really got us? You can't engage the culture with the gospel that first has not engaged you. Like, you know how people are like, oh, that's just who I am. Nah.
Keep. Drop the mic. Drop the mic.
Shaping the code.
I got a question on the process. How do you go from the can you explain to us the process of going from not putting God first to putting God first? Like, what were you going through? Like some things that started changing mentally that hit that switch from that, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think for me it was, I think about, for instance, fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, so on and so forth. When I start to notice that I'm not long-suffering with people, when I start to notice that I'm not experiencing joy, when I start to take on the anger of the world. So that's one of the dangerous things about only reading people who, like, for instance, especially during that period in which I talked about, they're great books that talk about racial justice and anti-racism. However, the problem with 99% of those books is they lack hope. And the Christian does not have that luxury to lack hope. And so for me, what I would do is I would take that information in, and I would say, well, ain't no hope for these white folks. You know what I'm saying? And then that, you think by eating that cake that it only it affects your relationship with white folks. It affects every area of life. You know what I'm saying? And then you start to become a little less diligent in loving your wife and loving your kids. And maybe in business, you start to, you know what, I deserve this. Let me skim a little bit. And then your convictions become loose in every area of life. And I think oftentimes I'll say this, and it also, it's a correlation, and I'm not saying but it also happened when I stopped going to church. Like, the moment I left my church and was like, they're not doing the justice thing the way that I want them to, I'm mature enough, I can have church at home or just read and listen to Jackie preach the mess out that text, and you know what I'm saying? She wasn't strong enough to keep me from my sin, you know what I'm saying? But but what I'm saying is that it's the moment I left fellowship. It's not like when the Hebrews talks about not forsaking it says, make sure in 3:13, encourage each other as long as it's called today, not tomorrow, not next week. Encourage each other because your hearts will not be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. We often feel like I can be a churchless Christian, and that is impossible. Like, we have to be connected to community. And so I began to lose hope. I began to distance myself from community, and I started to justify the things that I wanted because I felt like I was a good person. And those things compel in comparison to when you actually look at the magnificent stature of who Jesus is, and you realize, oh, I don't deserve any of that. So it helped reset me. And the best thing I did was, even in my wilding out, if you will, I returned back to church. At that point, I didn't confess, but I just returned back to church, and I was kind of like, I know this is just going to help me. And then eventually, just being around Christians who love to talk about Jesus, because all my Christian friends at that time only want to talk about how terrible white people were. And I was like, this is exhausting. Like, can we take a white supremacist time out or something? Like, what is happening? And then eventually, I said, you know what, I need to be around some people who just want to talk about Jesus because he's good. And then that just helped me. And then I realized, oh, no, I need to confess some stuff. So anyway, yeah, I would encourage you well, I would say those are the things that I had witnessed in my personal life.
Yeah, I have a really good friend and mentor in the room that reminds me of Titus 2, and it's the training room of grace, right? So it's exercising that faith every single day. Like I feel like it's being a teacher is another question. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what's going on there, so there's something in there. You know what I'm saying? The devil is trying to stop what I'm about to share, right? What's great is that I don't want you to kind of have the perspective of like you arrive to this place and you stay there. I think you have to understand that it's a daily decision. It's a Christian walk. It's the journey. It's laying aside every sin that like derails us and makes us not run. You know what I'm saying? With purpose, the race before us. So I think it's understanding that it's a daily decision that we submit onto God, that we're in the training room of grace. I used to work in the gym, and it's like, how do you get stronger? You lift metal things, right? So for me, it's just like in the same way, if you think in the spiritual sense, it's like continuing, like Sho was saying, to be in community, being in your word, being around people who challenge you to get closer to God, not pull you away from him. I feel like we leave that unchecked a lot. We have a lot of relationships unchecked, and we like keep them around because of like, you know, convenience. But at the same exact time, we have to understand like we're always going in a certain direction. We're a boat at sea. And it's very easy to drift. You know what I'm saying? So I think just being mindful of our daily walk and letting that change the overall projection of where we're going.